Yes, Dr. Iqbal, Walaikum Salam.
So I've got two questions, if I may, asked today, but I'll start with the first one, if I may. In Islam, we're told God is almighty, He has power over everything, and everything that happens according to God's will. One of the most important principles is the unity of God. Similarly, the Jews also say the unity of God is very important. After Jesus, when St. Paul took over the reins of Christianity, and he interpreted Christianity according to his own ways, and his disciples went on to interpret Christianity and the Trinity, etc. My question is, Azur, to God, unity of God is very important, and yet God allowed Christianity to spread in the form that it spread. Does it show that God had some sympathy with the Christians, even though the unity of God is being questioned? And was it important to let them spread?
Now, this is a very interesting question, but first of all, let's return to the premise of the question. Whatever happens, happens according to the will of God. If a person abuses his child in London or anywhere else, does it happen with the approval and will of God? Tell me this. What is happening to the Bosnians? Is it happening with the will of God? You see, more people are criminal in the world than those who are innocent. So, by following your line of argument, one would think that it's a very vicious God who is controlling the world, because His will is being done, and it's all disorder and chaos and cruelty and suffering which we observe taking place in the whole world. So first of all, let's correct your understanding of the will of God. It means that wherever God's will works without interference from outside, that thing is always perfect. There is no disorder in that. But where God permits other wills to play their own part, if they don't follow God's will, then suffering will begin. But if you remain within the domain of God's will, then that will be Jannah. That is what is demonstrated to us in the form of the first story we hear about Adam and Eve. The Holy Quran doesn't say that Eve caused Adam to sin, but it says that somehow they did. Adam faltered. And that is one very important thing which we should tell the West, that it's not the woman who is responsible for sin, it was the man who was responsible for sin. And then they both sinned. Now, what happened then? When they sinned, they were turned out of the Jannah. So what was that Jannah? Jannah means a garden. A garden was composed of many trees. And what were those trees? Some of them were trees of good, and one was a tree of evil. So when they partook of the fruit of the evil tree, then they were told to leave the Jannah, the place of peace and an abode of contentment and happiness. So from that I infer, and from other verses of the Holy Quran, that the Jannah the Holy Quran is speaking is not the material Jannah of a garden which we know as in ordinary terms. It was the Jannah of God's law, Sharia. Once the Sharia was given to Adam, as long as he lived within the law of the Sharia, it was Jannah. God's will was in action, it was operative. When he started his own will to play a role in his life, from then on misery began and suffering began. So that is the meaning of God's will. Now we have enough demonstration of God's will in the universe. There is no disorder, everything runs in perfect symmetry. But the moment we see life asserting its own will, from then on misery and suffering begins. Right? Thank you. Second question, please.
Okay. Generally in Islam, from what I've read briefly, we believe in mankind and other animal species having evolved. Can you just clarify for me, Huzur? Is it assumption that everything had its separate or neo-Darwinism or Darwinism assumes that mutations occurred and there were interspecies changes? In Islam, from what I can gather, everything had its own beginning, separate development.
I don't look at it from that point of view. There are two possible views existing on the way evolution took place. Number one, that chance was the god of evolution. At every throw of dice, something happened. And somehow or the other, that which was orderly began to follow by chance, until billions of chances took part in pushing the life forward on the path of evolution and improvement. That is the theory of those who believe in blind evolution. The other are like Christian scholars who believe in the theory of Genesis. They believe it didn't happen like that. Everything which was born exactly as we find it today. Man was given the shape of man right from the very beginning. Apes were given the shape of apes right from the very beginning. Worms were created as worms. So God created everything, every living thing in its finished form. That is the second theory. According to the Holy Quran, everything in life evolved, but evolved with a design. It was a guided evolution and not a blind evolution. And the very purpose of creation was to create man. So before man reached that stage of perfection, or life reached that stage of perfection, where we could call it man, whatever was created, it was still man which was being created at an earlier stage. For instance, the Holy Quran mentions the creation of man also in the form of vegetation. وَأَنْبَتَكُمْ نَبَاتًا. He raised you like vegetable, in vegetative form. And then the Holy Quran speaks of a period in the history of man where lam yakun sham mazkura. He was, but he was not worthy of mention. So many old commentators also, those commentators who are truly holy and who have divine guidance, if not in so many words, but in a sense of protection from evil thoughts and things. If you read the commentaries of those, some of them have reached this point, have reached this, the underlying message. They say it seems, I have read in one commentary, it seems that God is referring to a period in the history of man where he was in some form completely, not completely, but in some form, so insignificant that you could not mention him with any pride. So because they had no idea of evolution, so they inferred from this that perhaps God is speaking of earlier stages of animal life when he was closer to beasts. But when you read all the references in the Quran relating to the development of life, to infer this is not difficult. It becomes the only obvious solution, that God is speaking of man at such stages when he was not yet man. Lam yaku sham maskura. Also it speaks of a silent world where nobody is mentioned. So when you read Ambatakum Nabata, he raised you as vegetative growth, then you immediately come to the scenario of life going through a form which cannot articulate, where there is complete silence from the whole globe. There is life, but it cannot express itself, cannot speak, cannot utter anything, no sound. And that is the scenario which the Holy Quran develops. So it is a very vast subject, and it would take many, many hours to refer to the verses which speak on evolution and how it took place, the stages which the Holy Quran describes. And the Holy Quran also says He created you tebaka, layer after layer after layer. Then the Holy Quran speaks of what is happening in the uterus of your mothers. He says, we give you different shapes and different forms in the uterus. In that there are clues for wise people to study. Now people are, even non-Muslims are amazed at this reference. No surgery was carried out during the time of Rasul Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and what happened inside the uterus was totally unknown. So for the Holy Quran, Kaifa yusawwirukum fil arham. These are the words. Look how God gives you different forms and shapes within the bellies of your mothers. And the scientists say, the evolutionists, that the embryo of man, right from the beginning till the end when he is delivered as a whole boy or a girl, that embryo passes through the entire history of evolution, but in a much quicker format, which takes place very rapidly. So the Holy Quran is so full of these references, for that it will require, as I said, many days of discussion. Okay? Please, next. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. So my question is related to the virgin birth of Jesus Christ. There is a medical theory that at the time when the sex of the child is determined in the uterus of the mother, it is possible that due to some kind of imbalance of hormones, both the female and the male sex
organs are created.
Mm-hmm. And with the same token, it's said that Mary was one of those child, and thus the self-conception was possible, which provides.
You see, on that I have already spoken many a time before. The fact is that this or there are other possibilities as well. But the fact is that this is not just a theory, it is a well-known fact of life that there are some boys and girls who are halfway between boys and girls. Yeah. And then they go to the doctor, to the surgeon, and say, they make their choice, make us a girl, make us a boy. How can they make anybody a boy or a girl unless the organs were provided by God? And that is exactly what they're talking about when they say somebody's sex was changed and he was made a boy, and somebody's sex was changed and she was made a girl. What they do is they find both the organs together, and unless one is removed by operation, the other cannot develop fully in the presence of the second organ. So if the female organs are removed and the male organ is left, then they suddenly, because there is no competition, so they suddenly begin to grow normally, and then the person becomes a boy. If male organ is removed and female organs are left, then they grow and that becomes a girl. So it is also scientifically possible, it cannot be ruled out, that both organs, the organs don't appear outside. They may remain within. Maybe partial organs are there. For instance, those cells which create sperms, they are developed and the rest is just, it is in a state of partial death, it withers out, let's say. Now, what might have happened, we don't know, but this is a possibility, what I'm telling you. So when such a person, such a woman, sees a vision which is extremely exciting, it is possible that that organ which was already within her, that got activated, and it discharged itself within the uterus or system, wherever it was. And then the ovum was fertilized. Once it was fertilized and the child began to grow, then according to these scientists, the other organ must die out. So only the female part would remain, and the male part would wither out and become extinct. So these are some of the possibilities, but we don't know exactly how it happened. We certainly know it is possible. It is possible in vegetative kingdom. We know that some flowers have both the sexes. It is possible in animal kingdom that self-pollination, like it happens in vegetation, vegetative growth, this what they call, the sperm of the same body goes into the ovum of that animal, and it gets fertilized. This is possible. The scientists know it happens in the animal kingdom. In the human beings, they have no definite experience, no definite record that a girl was in fact a girl had both organs, male and female, and the male organ fertilized the egg in the girl. There is no definite evidence of that, except for occasional cases like one which happened in South America, where a girl reported herself to have become pregnant. The mother knew that the girl was chaste. The girl claimed to be chaste. So the mother took her to the doctors, and she was admitted in the hospital. All checks were applied, and the doctors were amazed to find that the girl was right, and she had not met with any man. So a team from American doctors was sent there, and the North American doctors, and under their care, the birth took place, and it was a baby girl which was born, and this matter was reported in many journals, medical journals. The one I have in mind was published in Indonesia, and from there, some Ahmadi sent me a copy of the journal, and this is how it happened. But in the case of that girl, the phenomenon responsible for that birth could only produce girls. That is another complication which we cannot disregard. It is not enough to prove that because it has come to the knowledge of scientists that such birth did take place without the participation of man, so the case of Jesus would be like this. Because they studied the phenomenon and they came out with the answer that it can happen, but if this happens the way it happened there, it would always result in female birth and not in male birth. But other phenomena are possible, where male birth could also take place. So when people ask me, why didn't it happen in other cases of human beings? Why only with Jesus? My answer is that if it happened, nobody would believe. First of all, the chance is very, very rare. Maybe 1 in a billion. But if it had happened, suppose, that poor girl would be claiming she was innocent and nobody would believe her. And science had not advanced at that in the previous stages of human history as to determine positively whether the girl was right or not. So the matter may not be reported to the scientist at all. The girl would not care. Or the parents said, all right, let it be as it is. And they wouldn't believe either. So the only case which needed positive evidence in support of the chastity of the girl was the case where a prophet was to be born. It was a very important case. So the Holy Quran gave that verdict in her favor, in the favor of Mary, and declared she was a chaste lady. That is the reason why this discussion started. Had it been an ordinary person, nobody would have cared whether it was a chaste girl or a wanton girl who gave birth to a child. But here it was a special case. Now this protects all the women in the world. If a woman gives birth and she says in the name of Allah that I swear to God, no man touched me. If we are true in our belief that it happened once, it can happen again. So we have no right after this, after her swearing by God that this child is born without my contact with any male, then we have to accept that. We have no right to disbelieve her or punish her. So Mary's case has come to the defense of all chaste women who are innocent, who may have this experience. But it is so rare, it doesn't happen every day. And nowadays if it happens, the scientists can prove it. Right?
Exactly.
Yes, please.
Did Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam ever have to pay interest? Did he ever have to pay interest on the loan that he took? The Jews never demanded? The Jews who gave loan to Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, they never demanded interest on that.
You see, I don't know which loan you are talking about,
Yes.
but there is one thing which is positive, which he did, and which does not fall into the category of interest. Once he invited people to loan to him horses for those able-bodied Muslims who were about to be sent to some battlefield, but who did not have money enough to buy their own horses. So Rasul Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam declared that whoever gives me one horse today, after the battle is over, I'll give him 2 horses to every single horse which he gives me. Now this has become the bone of contention among many scholars. And some have even rejected this hadith. So we can't trust it because Rasul Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam could not have gone into terms with and conditions with somebody which were similar to that of usury and interest. But many wise Muslim jurists and scholars have pointed out that you judge Islam and the understanding of the Quran from the words and acts of Rasul Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. You can't apply your understanding upon him. He is to teach you, not you are not to teach him. So one thing is certain, that whatever he said or did, it was not in violation of the Holy Quran. So if we went into this, then this deal is correct and it is not usury, it is not interest. We should apply our mind to find out what it is. So these scholars have suggested, different solutions. This came up for discussion during one of the Majlis Iftah meeting, and I was also there, and I also participated in that decision ultimately. That was regarding the bonds which are given by the government. So some very holy jurists in Islam like Imam Abu Hanifa, etc., of that status, have suggested that the fact is that the state is like a mother, like a father to the people. If the state is in need of something and it gives something as a gift, as an inam, as a reward, promising by herself, while the state also has the power to confiscate, and it does not. That deal, that contract is not a usury contract. And this is what we adopted after due considerations as a resolution in Jamaat Ahmadiyya, that if the state offers something in reward of the benefit she draws from anybody's money or commodity, that reward will be considered as a reward and it will not be considered as usury. So whenever Rasul Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam borrowed for the sake of state, it was people's requirement. It was people's interest which was served. And that individual who gave something, he was at no risk and at no loss. So the very philosophy of usury is lacking here. You see, the philosophy of usury is to save people from the exploitation of the rich people. Here in this case, it's exactly the opposite. And again, it's not a case of one individual against another. It is a case of state versus its own members of society. So from that, the definition of interest which we drew was that, over and above the normal definition, that if the state offers a reward to those who serve at the cause of, who sacrifice financially at the hour of need for the state, then that reward will not be forbidden for them to benefit from. So that is why when you buy bonds, security bonds for instance from the government, whatever government pays on that bond have not been declared forbidden. You understand? So that covers all the dealings of Rasul Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he promised to give something more. Again, there is one other factor of another condition of interest which is lacking from those bargains which you might have in mind. Usury requires, or that is to say, let's say interest requires that the extra, the one anyone pays to the lender is not just one fixed amount. It is related to time. As a unit of time passes, you pay that much. Another unit is added, you pay twice as much. Another, and then you go on adding. So it is always in percentages that they calculate how much one owes to the lender. If 1 year passes, you pay 10%, 2 years passes, you pay 20%, 10 years pass, you pay 100%. So when Rasul Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam promised that extra horse, it was not related to time. Whenever he could give the horse back, he would voluntarily give another horse. So, but that is not the only reason why it is declared not to be interest. It is declared not to be interest in relation to state versus the members of the state. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Wa alaikum salam.
Hazur, I have a question about namaz. In namaz, in first two rakats, we recite with a loud voice, and we also recite any surah after.
In all the rakats, in all the namaz.
No, in only first two rakats.
In Zohar and Asr as well.
No.
So why do you say that?
That's my question, actually. That is my question. In Maghrib and Isha and Fajr, we recite with a loud voice.
This is a question which I have repeatedly answered. You see, what is the normal, natural singing time? Tell me. Is the middle of the day?
No.
Or it is the morning and evenings and nights? Tell me.
It's morning, evenings.
And nights. So that is what the Holy Quran has done. Why do you have an objection against it?
I do not have
it is so natural.
I do not have objection.
No, I understand, of course. But I mean, no one. By you, I don't mean you personally. None can have any objection. It's so natural.
Yes.
Right?
So I want to know, was this a law which was set on the very first day, or this law?
Practice started exactly as the namaz came into being.
Right.
As namaz was made compulsory, or obligatory or optional, both namazis were mentioned right from the beginning, and the form was told exactly as it is today.
That answers my question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But again, at night, late night, it is forbidden to recite whatever you are reading in namaz loudly. For another reason. Because you may disturb other people who are asleep, and it's not compulsory for them to get up at that time. Yes?
Assalamu alaikum.
MashaAllah, you're going very fast now. Eh?
I'd like to ask two questions if I may.
Yes, please.
The first one is, in the Quran it says that there will be a day of resurrection for every human being, in which God will judge everybody on their mistakes, on things that have done good. So what I'd like to know is, after someone dies,
if what? If someone dies?
When someone dies, between the time that they die and the day of resurrection, what state of being is that person in?
Yes, sir. That is called Alam-e-Barzakh, a no man's land. What happens is that we do not lose our consciousness, our existence, after death. For a few days, maybe, for some period, let's not call it days, the human consciousness of its existence is dazed, and the life seems to be in a state of, half asleep, or something has happened. But gradually and slowly it evolves into its own independent identity. It happens differently with different people. The more pious they are, more godly inclined they are, more rapidly this consciousness develops. Because the consciousness I'm talking about is a consciousness not related to this world, but to the other world, existence in the other world. So Hazrat Rasul Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has mentioned that the spirit, the soul, takes from 3 to 40 days to separate totally from the body and to sever its ties completely. So that is what has led me to infer what I am telling you, that as long as it is not fully severed from the bodies, it may have a confused consciousness. What I am, half here and half there, But when it develops its independent identity as a soul after death, having nothing to do with matter anymore, then it comes into its consciousness. But that consciousness is not the final form in which it will be raised. It is like the embryo on the first day. It has some form of life, but it is so different from the life of the delivered child after 9 months. So the Holy Quran has said that your first raising and your second raising will be like the childbirth in the uterus of your mothers. It's very deep message and very rich message of philosophy is given in this. To me, it creates the scenario that like the life on the first day when the ovum is fertilized, is still a life which will develop into a child. But it is so far removed from the ultimate child when it is delivered with all the faculties at its commands. So this is why there are two births after death. One birth is immediate. That birth is not very far removed from our state of consciousness here on earth. But when it will be developed finally, that is what we call resurrection. It will be raised as if into nothing, into something totally new. So the Holy Quran says, referring to that final resurrection, that you will be raised into something of which you have no knowledge. وَنُنْشِئُكُمْ فِي مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. We will raise you into something of which you have no idea. So if immediately after death we know what soul goes through, and if it is the same feeling as we have here, then how can we say that God raised us into something of which we have no idea? So that is why I am telling you, now apply this statement to the scenario which the Holy Quran has mentioned. The difference between the state of the embryo on the first day and the difference of the same thing when it develops into a full-grown child and it is delivered as a healthy child, the difference between the two would be as great as the difference between the soul which is just come to life after death and that soul which will be ultimately ready for question and answer and will be resurrected. That would take a very, very long time. How it will happen, we don't know. But the souls will be put through that. Now the Holy Quran gives us just a specimen, an idea of how we can calculate this time. It says that when they will be raised, they will talk among themselves and say, how long did we tarry on earth? Some of them will say a day or two perhaps. The others will say maybe an hour or two. And God says, no, you don't know. Still you don't know. Now when you look back at time, the farther away from you of some instant in time, the smaller it appears. You see, your childhood at the age of 80 appears to be a small period which just passed quickly. And when you look back at the time of death at your life, it seems to be so small and squeezed. But still it seems to be years, not days and hours. So that means that you are looking back at life on earth from a place which in time which is so far removed that when you look back you think it was just a small hour or something, but the remarks of Allah at that time indicate that it would be much smaller than that. You don't know, So that means it is maybe 1 trillion years or so many billions years, I don't know. But the distance would be very big in time for the final resurrection. First answer is question is answered.
Thanks very much.
Was the second contained in this answer or not?
No.
It's a different question?
Sort of answered it a little
It's a different question?
Yeah, it is, but you've answered it a little bit. Many scientists argue the point that when the egg cell joins to the sperm cell, that's when life begins. Yet other scientists argue the point that it's not until the fetus arrives that you can actually physically say that life begins. So I'd like to know how does Islam see?
You see, there are two types of lives, or let's say two definitions of life, which can apply to this situation. Life may mean just a growth, like any growth in any animal. That is, we can refer to that as life. It's a life phenomenon. When the cells multiply, they absorb the food from around and turn it into more complex chemicals. This is the life process. So the life process begins right from the word go. When the ovum is fertilized by the sperm, life begins. But it is without a soul. Because when it is given birth at that period, it simply cannot survive as an independent identity. So according to the Quran and the Hadith, the giving of soul happens at a later stage, at around 4.5 months or thereabout. Then the soul is breathed into that, not from outside, but by the will of God. Life comes into another form of life, where it becomes independent and gains its mature identity as an individual. If you operate on the mother at that time and remove the early state of that child, embryonic stage, the doctors say that it still can survive, although it's difficult. But in incubators and things, it can still be kept alive. So from that, whatever the date be, from that date onward, where according to the scientists, the fetus can survive into an independent identity, that is the time when it is given life. So we are talking of two types of lives. One from the definition, the previous definition which I have described, and the other from the definition of human point of view, where we believe soul is given. Now that child, if you can refer to it as child, which is prior to reception of soul, can be kept in laboratories artificially, indefinitely, as a live thing. But it will be a vegetative growth. It will never gain any consciousness. It will remain a sort of mechanical form of life, like computers live, but not the human life. Okay? Thank you. At last, and maybe the last.
Hazur, I got two questions.
You have two questions, I know.
If the time
No news to me. You see, following your beautiful tradition, everybody has started asking two questions. Right.
The subject of parda has
Yes.
been fully explained. The subject of parda has been fully explained in the Holy Quran and the Hadith sayings of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Right.
And also Hazur have also spoken on this subject on several occasions.
So why does the question arise? That is the point. That is perplexing me. This is my question to you.
As far
the way you have beautifully described that the subject of parda is so completely covered by the Quran, by the Hadith, by my expositions and so on, why does the question remain to be asked?
I read the
No. Answer me this first. Answer me.
I read the argument why I am asking.
Okay.
As for the instructions of Islam
Yes.
for the Muslims
Right.
are in respect of parda are very clear. But Hazur, when we Muslims invite non-Muslims to our social or religious functions and arrange a separate enclosure for women, most often the European ladies question the validity of separating women for parda purpose. As in the Western civilization, there is nothing like parda, and men and women freely mix on any social or religious occasions. It is sometimes very difficult to explain to them the wisdom of Islamic parda. Would Hazur most kindly advise us how can we effectively explain to the European men and women the wisdom of parda?
From this question it is implied that I have only spoken on this subject from the point of view of Muslims and never from the point of view of non-Muslims.
I don't say Hazur that like that.
But is that right?
Still Hazur.
The way you described, you framed this question, it is automatically implied that I have been throwing light on the subject of parda only for the benefit of Muslims, and I have never touched this subject from the point of view of non-Muslims' doubts and suspicions regarding the validity of this order. Huh?
I don't say Hazur must have said.
So why don't you find out where?
I wanted
why
to
did
use
you
my
have?
knowledge,
Why did you have access only to those tapes where I had spoken in relation to the Muslims? Why couldn't you have access to those cassettes and videos which are available, in which I have answered this question exactly from the point of view that you are raising today? Okay?
All right, Hazur.
Jazakumullah. But no complaints. Why you seem so depressed after this?
No, Hazur, not like that.
Say, but still, your tone is very,
it was for the
let's say, Rondoop tone, you know.
No.
As you are about to cry.
Hazur,
Pardon?
the background of this question, if Hazur allow me,
No, I won't allow you that. Because time is short and everybody understands the background.
Right.
I know this happens, I know these questions are raised, even eyebrows are raised, but I have already covered this question from various angles so many times.
Yes.
If it doesn't satisfy, then I can't do anything. Allah can satisfy only.
Yes.
Okay, next.
Second question, Hazur.
Yes, please.
I have received a letter from Sayyid Abdul Rahman Baraki of Ajmer, India,
Right.
Chief Muallim Gaddi Nashin, informing me that Urs Mubarak of Hazrat Khaja Moinuddin Chishti Rahmatullah Alayh will be held on 15th December 1993 to 23rd December 1993.
Very interesting, yes.
In another letter from Haji Pir Sayyid Ghulam Muhammad Niazi.
Have you brought all the correspondence with you?
No, different topics for that.
But, yeah, that's what
There's a different topic on the both letters. Haji Sayyid Pir Ghulam Muhammad Niazi, he said that the amount sent by you will be spent on recitation of Milad Sharif, Khatme Khaja Gan, and presenting of cloth chadar, flower wreath and scent for the holy Mazar Sharif on your behalf. The sacred tabarakat and taweez will be sent to you after Urs Mubarak.
How much money did you send, by the way? Tell me, if it's not a secret.
I'm explaining in my question, Hazur.
Beg your pardon?
I'm explaining my position in my question.
No, I asked you a simple question. How much money did you waste on that?
I never sent, but
You intended to send?
No, Hazur, no.
So he's talking of the possible money, you know.
No.
You may send. I thought he was talking of some money you had sent him.
No. Not sent. He has just sent.
Made an appeal. It's just an appeal.
It's a typed letter.
Achha, okay.
Typed letter.
Okay.
As as I have never attended an Urs Mubarak or Urs Sharif, death anniversary of any Mujaddad, would Hazur most kindly advise us the following? Is it also celebrated for other Mujaddideen outside India? For example, for Hazrat Sayyid Abdul Qadir Jilani. Secondly, whether the promised Messiah, alayhi salam, and the Khulafa, may peace of Allah be upon them, of the promised Messiah, alayhi salam, have written something regarding the celebration of Urs Sharif.
Now, you are a born Ahmadi, aren't you?
Yes, Hazur.
Huh?
Yes, Hazur.
Have you ever seen any Ahmadi celebrating Urs?
No.
No?
I never have any
so,
idea.
Why are you interested in finding out where it is written? You think there are secret writings on one side and an obvious practice on the other? And we are hiding some writings about this? All the writings of Masih Maud al-Islam are available. Yes. You might have gone through them because you read, I know you read a lot, mashallah. So when there is no such practice to be witnessed, when you have never read any reference to this in any writing, have you ever read that?
Nothing.
So why do you ask this question? The answer is obvious, no?
No, Hazur, the first question, Hazur asked me whether I'm born. I'm not very sure whether I'm born Ahmadi because when
I'm very happy.
I don't know exactly.
At least your Urs will never be celebrated.
No, Hazur, the thing is that
nobody knows the date of your birth and things.
Although my father accepted Ahmadiyyat in the time of Khalifatul Masih II, but I don't know exactly which date he, whether...
So luckily, both are lucky.
Yes.
Now, question of Urs should be disposed of because you know you have lived all your life, conscious life I mean. Let's forget about the date of birth. Eh? You have lived your conscious life among Ahmadis, haven't you?
Yes, Hazur.
Have you ever witnessed any Ahmadis celebrating Urs?
No, Hazur, not that point.
But still they might have written something about it.
No, Hazur, the point is when we go to the non-Ahmadis, Muslims, and they talk of these things, and they say what the validity of this and this argument they give. So we have to tell them something that this is not in the time of
So why don't you ask this question simply? Why did you make the question so complicated and so lengthy? The simple question was, if a non-Ahmadi celebrates Urs and he insists that this practice is Islamic, what can we say in answer in response to that?
Yes.
To prove that it is not an Islamic practice?
Yes.
Is this the question?
Yes.
Now it's a valid question. I'll answer this. Okay?
Yes.
Now you can ask a counter question to such a man to find out if Hazur Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam's demise was in any way celebrated in any form during the first 3 centuries.
Yes.
Show us where and when, by whom.
Yes.
They have started celebrating Milad now, so that is why I didn't rule it out altogether. They have started doing it.
Yes.
But Hazur Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam's birth or death, neither of the two were ever celebrated or mourned during the lifetime of the companions, of the Khulafa, of the first generation, of the second generation, of the third generation. And these are the 3 generations to which Hazur Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam has referred as generations of light. Then the light will begin to ebb out and gradually turn into darkness. So these practices which you come across, they are the children of darkness. So they have to produce evidence, not you. Right?
Yes, sir.
Jazakumullah. Don't mind my comments on your question, because I had not made any comments. the audience would be totally disappointed with me because they're so used to laughing when you come and enjoy. It is not in a derogatory sense at all. They respect you, I know, very profoundly. Only, you bring mirth and happiness in the atmosphere and they feel so relaxed when you come. So that is why, I have to play fun sometimes with you.
Yes, sir.
Right? Okay. No offense is meant, none should be taken, right? Jazakumullah. Please.
Assalamualaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
I want to ask this question.
Now, which country are you from?
From Gambia.
From the Gambia?
Yes.
Right.
Did God already decide his servants who will go to heaven and who will go to hell?
Pardon?
Did God already decide his servants who will go to heaven and who will go to hell?
Mm-hmm.
Is it already decided?
You mean name by name?
Did God already decide?
This is what I'm saying. Did he decide name by name? What is your name?
My name is Usman.
Huh?
Usman.
Usman.
Yes.
So has God said anywhere that Usman will go either to hell or to heaven?
I don't know.
No. So why are you asking me? You can't find any. You know that. Person to person he has not decided. But character to character he has decided. He has decided that those who do evil deeds and do not repent and do not seek forgiveness of me and whom I do not forgive, they will go to hell. But they are a nondescript category. Name by name, person by person, they have not been mentioned. So let God decide. Why should we bother about it? Only we should be bothered about which category we belong to in general. Okay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Can I ask this question as well? Did God did a favor for the people who are Muslims by birth?
Right.
Did he make favor? Did he do a favor for them?
Do what?
A favor.
Does he do
You see, no favor, because you have forgotten the fact that according to the Holy Quran, every child is born a Muslim. Fitrat Allah allati fatara an-nasa alayha. It says that we have created human beings so that every child that is born on fitrah, that is nature, the nature of God. And then the Holy Quran specifically says every child is born on Islam. So God has not done any disfavor to anybody. All children are born innocent and with a correct inclination and orientation. So later on their parents make them either Jews or Christians or Muslims or non-Muslims. But all those who are born in the houses of Muslims are not necessarily Muslims. They are not necessarily Muslims when they grow up. They become evil, they become renegades, they become apostates and so on. Anything can happen to them. Right? So God has given an equal start. This is the question, this is what my answer is. He has not been unjust in giving starts to different children so that you can say this is an unequal start he gave to different people. To begin with, everybody had the same start. Right.
Can I ask you this final question?
But please come closer to the microphone. Yes.
The Prophet Ibrahim had his dad will go to hell or something.
What?
The Prophet Ibrahim, had people said his dad will go to hell. If he asks God to forgive his dad, will God forgive his dad?
I can't understand the question.
Hazrat Ibrahim al-Islam go to hell. He's just
No, you can't say that, Pan.
His dad.
Is for dad. Oh, right, right. Yes, it is declared that he was an enemy of God. And why his case was openly declared and announced has a reason, has a background. Normally, God does not give verdict person to person regarding the living beings as individuals. God gives verdict about categories, as I told you earlier. But there are certain exceptions which take place. Now, in case of Abraham's father, the problem was that Hazrat Ibrahim ﷺ had promised him that I'll pray for your forgiveness. And he started praying for his forgiveness. Allah didn't like it because he did not want to refuse Abraham's prayers. He was so close to him. So the Holy Quran says that as far as the keeping of the promise is concerned, God let him do it for a while. But then told him, Abraham, he was an enemy of mine. And from then on, Abraham stopped praying for him. So that is the reference in the Quran which explains everything in itself, doesn't it?
All right,
thank you. Yes, please come. You can also come and wait in the line.
Assalamu alaikum. So my question is about the laws and the legislations, how they will be implied, how when Jamaat Ahmadiyya, as it's spreading very fast, when they will be in a separate states or in the form of a country, would it be
you see, the question of legislation is a question of politics. You're talking in that area, of that area. The Holy Quran does not give you any, let's say, constitution for a country to be run politically. Nowhere in the Holy Quran it is mentioned. Only one condition is laid, which is very clear, which should be common to all governments which come into play under Islamic supremacy. The rule is, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُكُمْ أَن تُؤَدُّوا الْأَمَانَاتِ إِلَى أَهْلِهَا وَإِذَا حَكَمْتُمْ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ أَن تَحْكُمُوا بِالْعَدْلِ. Just two principles are laid down and the rest is left for the people to judge. Whenever you cast your vote, here amana means a trust in the form of vote, expression of will. Whenever you come to a stage or a point where you are required to cast your vote, express your will, do it with honesty and integrity. And cast your vote in the favor of the one who most deserves it. That is one angle from the point of view of those who cast votes and vote people into the government. The only direction given is this. Now, if you are voted into power, then what happens? Then the same verse goes on saying in the second part, إِذَا حَكَمْتُمْ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. When you are in government and you begin to decide and dispense with the affairs of the public, then أَن تَحْكُمُوا بِالْعَدْلِ. Then you must always dispense with absolute justice. Rule with absolute justice. Decide with absolute justice. So what is this absolute justice? Absolute justice puts all the various followers of religions and sects and beliefs and political dominations at par with each other. There is only one single platform. Civil rights will never be judged according to the beliefs, views, doctrines and practices of the people. The government is bound to dispense the matters of government with absolute justice. This is the only form of government which I read in the Holy Quran. Right?
You're right. But would the Qaza be deciding the...
Again, according to justice. Now, the justice demands that if I don't believe in a let's say Sharia or a divinely revealed law, it should not be applied to me. Only in matters of common human interest. There are two areas of laws. Those laws which can be applied universally on the basis of human practices. There, some religions may have given you guideline regarding those laws as well. There, those laws will be applied equally to Muslims, non-Muslims, etc. alike. And that will not be injustice, because even if they didn't believe in Islam, the treatment of such a given crime would remain to be the same. So, if not through religious principles, through democratic principles, those who are in power, who command majority, they can legislate in accordance with what they think to be right. So that is not unjust. But the areas where even the human relationship are directed differently to be carried according to different religions, there it would be unjust to impose religious laws of one religion on the followers of another religion. Now, the best illustration of this can be given in the lifetime of Hazrat Rasul Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam after he migrated to Medina. He signed a charter of understanding, of code of conduct, in which Jews, pagans, Christians, Muslims were all signatories. He ruled Medina not as a prophet of God, but as a custodian of the trust which was laid in him by the population of Medina. So the ideal Muslim state came to be born automatically. In the area of justice I'm talking about. Whenever there was a dispute between a Jew and a Muslim, or a Jew and a pagan and a Jew or somebody else, he inquired from both parties, which procedure would you follow? Would you like me to follow? Would you go by common law, by traditions and practices of the Arabs? Would you require me to decide on the principles of Islam as I understand them, or on the principles of your religion? So the choice was always left to the parties to a feud. And when they were satisfied, they agreed on the one procedure. Rasulullah always decided according to that procedure. That is why the allegation of the Jews that Rasulullah mercilessly killed, ordered so many Jews to be killed, is totally false. Because when they were conquered, they were again given this option. They said, we will like our case to be decided through arbitration, and through arbitration of our choice. So Rasulullah said, all right, go ahead and do it. Give me the name of your arbitrator. And they named one Muslim arbitrator who they thought was always sympathetic to that tribe of the Jews. And it was the decision of that arbitrator, according to their own Shari law, that they were put to sword, all of them. So where is the blame on Rasulullah? In fact, in that act, he proved himself to be a paragon of justice. He gave them the choice and followed their choice to the letter. Right? Yeah. The second one?
Yeah. A quick question to your earlier answer to interest. So you said that if state rewards people, well, it's not a form of interest.
Right.
But it's the other way around. If people borrow something from state and state asks for the interest.
That is interest.
It's interest.
That is interest. It never happened in the life of Rasulullah. That becomes exploitation and usurpation. Right? Correct?
Exactly.
Thank you. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
I just wanted to ask, God wants us to...
You have borrowed this cap from someone, not on interest, I hope. Not on terms of interest, eh?
I hope not.
Okay.
Allah wants us to love Him, and Allah wants us to fear Him as well.
What?
Allah wants us to love Him.
Allah wants us to love Him.
You said wants? I couldn't follow the word.
Wants.
To understand. Wants, yes. Wants. Allah wants you to love Him.
Yes.
Is that what you say?
Yes.
Okay.
And He also requires us to fear Him. Is it possible just to love Him and not to fear Him?
Not to?
Not to fear.
To fear. Fear of God.
The word is fear.
Fear. Oh, I'm sorry.
Is it?
You see, your pronunciation of English must be very correct, but mine is not that correct. I couldn't follow you. Fear, you mean?
Yes.
That's right. You see, love and fear in relation to God have a very special connotation. Fear and love which go together, those are the fears and loves which are mentioned. Those who can't go together, they are not obviously mentioned. You fear a ghastly animal, you can't love it. Right? You can love your mother and also fear her. Right?
Yes.
So that is it. Love and fear in relation to the beloved one generally acquire a very special connotation, the fear of losing one's favor. Not to do something whereby you can fall foul of the person you love. That fear is taqwa in relation to Allah. Not like the fear of a beast. Because that fear pushes you apart, sends you away. But God's fear brings you closer to God. Because repeatedly the Holy Quran says, if you fear Allah, He will love you, you will be closer to Him, you will be in His custody. So it couldn't be that fear which you normally related to fear, which can be expressed as terror. Yeah. There is no terror of God.
I was actually thinking about the fear of His punishment rather than the fear of...
Fear of punishment is concentrated fear in the form of His displeasure. So that displeasure can take any form. Basically, if it is related to love, the prime fear should be that of displeasure. Then the displeasure in itself becomes a punishment. But if you are too crude and roughly strung, then you can't understand displeasure to be a punishment. Then a stick is also used. You see, this happens in everyday life. In the case of some mother's relation with their children, the children are very sensitively strung. Just an act of ignoring at the hand of their parents becomes a punishment for such children. There, the rod is always spared, there is no need for any rod. But if you are turning away, your displeasure doesn't produce any effect on the children, then that displeasure also is translated into the form of some strike, some spanking and things and so on. So it is the displeasure which expresses itself in different forms in relation to the person to whom that displeasure is shown. Right?
So we should be afraid of God's displeasure at us rather than being afraid of His punishment.
Displeasure would take the form of punishment according to your own state of development. Can take the form of, let's say, corporal punishment as well. Like a mother's displayer always does. That is why I started with the example of a mother. Right?
Yes.
But the best thing is to connect love with this fear. That is how you started. Why do you keep forgetting the part of the love? When you speak of love and fear together, then the fear of the lover is always concentrated on the danger of earning displeasure. You see, a lover constantly lives under the fear that my beloved may lose her care for me, her regard for me. I may fall foul of her. And that is the main fear. It is not the fear of any other punishment than just losing the favor. Right? Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum rahmatullah.
I was pondering a little while on the brother's question about Mary and her dual sexuality.
Right.
And I was thinking that I don't recall anywhere in the Holy Quran it mentioning homosexuality.
No.
I am aware that...
No, it mentions homosexuality with very strong censure.
Yes?
It does. You said homosexuality?
Yes. My question is, what is the Islamic view of homosexuality?
The Holy Quran is very specific on this. The Holy Quran tells you what happened to those people of the law, people of Lot. Mm-hmm. And the Holy Quran censures this in the strongest terms. It's an uncouth, filthy, unnatural habit in which they were involved, and that is why they were wiped out of the face of earth. That was the only reason why.
Right. I mean, that's the definitive answer. That's probably
because you see that in that incident there is a very profound message for us. Sex acquires a player not just for the sake of sex itself. Sex is an instrument for the preservation of species. And that instrument can only work for this purpose if it is a sex between opposites, not with the same kind. So the very purpose of the creation of sex, which developed over billions of years of the evolution of life, was to add pleasure to this act so that you may not disregard your responsibility to send your progeny to the future. If you had no pleasure in it, the life would become extinct much, much earlier than we can conceive. So that is the purpose. It is a purpose-built thing. So when you do something to it where the purpose is not served, then the punishment to that is that all right, you be extinct. I'll wipe you out. Because you are misusing this provision, favor of Allah, and you are denying the purpose of this pleasure. So all right, you face the natural consequences. I would like you to be extinct, wiped out. And that is what was done to the people of Lot. In what stronger terms would you require that the Holy Quran should mention this?
That will do fine. The modern day theory, of course, is that it's perhaps a psychological defect or an illness, or what? It's okay saying.
You see, it can be. I tell you, all sins can also result from an illness of the mind, which in itself is a product of sin to begin with. It is wrong to say that genetically these boys or girls are created in a way that they have no other choice but to do this. This is wrong. It's against the clear-cut principles laid down in the Holy Quran. What happens is there are influences right from the childhood on them, and you cannot deny the role of influences. That is why the Holy Quran says, choose the pious company, be careful about how you bring your children up, and so on and so forth. So right from the beginning, they might have seen things in their families, in their homes, which gradually created a sort of aversion to the opposite sex, which helped develop the taste only for a single sex. Now, there would be certain factors which were born out of sin. And when such a child permitted him to be carried away while the influence was very mild in the beginning, then his act of sin created that state ultimately where it turned into a disease. Now, this is very common. This is not a rare thing. It happens in every case, only you don't notice it. All the addictions begin like this. They begin with sin and become addictions. So when they become addictions, then you say, his poor man is helpless. But he was not helpless in the beginning. That is why he would be punished. Right? Thank you. Yes. What do you want to say that the food must be served now? Enough is enough? Is it the message from the doctor? Okay. But you said that. You raised the hand. Okay. So this should be the last question, because the people who are managing, who have prepared food, they would be waiting.
Right.
And
my question is brief. I hope the answer may be too. Although I'm not sure.
Beg pardon, you said?
My question relates to the causes and the results of the fall and the rise of the nations.
Right.
In present day, we see the powerful nations of the world, like those in the West. They are practically ruling the whole world, not their own countries only, and their leaders too, of course.
Right.
My question is that they are educated people who know history and who know religion as well, to some extent at least. The present day actions, which are based on complete injustice, as you have said in many of your sermons, why can't they realize what prevents them realizing that today they are on the top of the world? They should try to maintain that position by inculcating justice rather than unjust actions, which they are very much aware of, that they are being unjust in various parts of the world and to the various nations of the world.
The same applies to every sinner, doesn't it?
Why?
Every believer who sins knows it is wrong, and yet he does it.
I mean, they are educated people. They are
of course,
but why
of course, they are educated people, but they are corrupt educated people. There is difference between educated and uneducated. What the decisive factor is not education or lack of it. The decisive factor is the healthy attitude or corrupt attitude. So if an educated man becomes corrupt, he will be far more cunning in implementation of his corrupt practices and views than an uneducated person. He will be more dangerous anyway. So they are highly educated, so they know how to implement injustice more cleverly than others.
But don't they know that this will ultimately cause their downfall?
They know, but they know also that they won't be there by that time. There is that hope. And they know that at this time, if we assert justice, we will be the losers in politics. And the people are corrupt all around us. The platform on which we are standing wants crooked things to happen from us. So they are helpless in that sense. They know, but they also hope that by the time the consequences would develop, they would no longer be here. And they hope there will be no hereafter either.
So it means there is no hope for the near or distant future for majority of the human beings?
For the majority of?
Human beings.
You see, it depends on how you are talking of hope. At large, there is hope for humanity as long as the ultimate purpose of the creation is not fully consummated and served. And that is that the majority of mankind should accept the faith Islam, which is designed to be the faith of man as a universal animal, and it practices as a whole, benefits from it, and then it goes astray again. till that happens, mankind will not be destroyed. So there is a very strong hope. But as far as the hope for numbers is concerned, we can't say. Because numbers have always been sacrificed at the altar of quality. Being a doctor, you know how many possible lives are sacrificed for the sake of one single lucky sperm who reaches the ovum. Millions or billions at least in the whole lifetime, more than billions. May become trillion maybe. So the quality is what matters in the sight of Allah. So as far as the quality is concerned, unless that quality is achievable, of which I have spoken, mankind will continue to remain as a operative species on earth. Once that purpose is served and the mankind goes astray once again, then God will lose interest in their survival and whatever they do. Then ultimately that day of doomsday would dawn, which we read in all religions, which would wipe out mankind from the face of earth. Right?
Jazakallah.
Thank you.